In countries around the world, the recycling system is apparently in crisis. Spiralling costs, widespread fraud, and illegal dumping are all adding up to a terrible, toxic mess. So until we get a global solution, perhaps, is there really any point in recycling? You're watching Roundtable. Hello and a very warm welcome to the programme from me, David Foster. From a curbside perhaps in northern Europe to an illegal dumping ground on the other side of the world. That is the route taken by countless millions of tonnes of household recycling. Instead of being used again, it is often going into landfill or maybe it is burned. Is the recycling system a sham?
For decades, China was the world's largest importer of recyclable waste, but not anymore. In 2018, it banned 24 types of rubbish, including recycling, from entering its borders. Waste exporters like the US, Europe and Japan are still scrambling to find an alternative. 111 million tonnes of plastic produced between now and 2030 needs a new destination. The cost of processing recycling has rocketed. Much of it is being dumped as trash instead, and the amount we create isn't slowing down. In the last 60 years, more than 8 billion tonnes of plastic have been produced worldwide, and at best only 9% of it was being recycled, while 12% was burned. The rest was put into landfill or dumped and left to wash into rivers and oceans. So will the breakdown in global recycling lead to a better solution for the planet?
Okay, let's get talking. Margaret Bates is with us, former president of the Chartered Institution of Waste Management. Mick Davis here, Chief Operating Officer at Biffa, one of the UK's biggest waste companies. Sarah Jane Widdowson here too, waste management consultant, and Karl Williams, Professor of Waste Management at the University of Central Lancashire. Karl, a few years ago, a professor of waste management might have been thought of as an odd position, but it has become such a big thing in our everyday lives.
I think it's because waste is becoming so important nowadays, and people talk about it. Everybody is a waste manager. We deal with waste every day in our houses, and we're encouraged to do more and more recycling, and people want to do something to help the environment.
Is recycling a fool's business? What do you think?
Recycling is a great thing to do, but only if you're generating waste in the first place. What we really need to do if we're going to solve some of these problems we have with waste is really think carefully about what you buy and if you need it. Can you reuse it? All sorts of other aspects. So buying lots of disposable stuff that can then be recycled is not great for the environment.
I suppose what I'm getting at is, yes, we do produce waste. It would be ideal if we didn't produce anything like as much as we do. But we're all encouraged to recycle. But are we being sold fool's gold? I mean, does it really get recycled?
Yes, most of it does, and particularly if you can make sure that you make sure it's good enough quality. So when your local authority's saying to you, oh, can you rinse this out, can you do this? They're not asking you because they think you've got nothing better to do with your time. They're asking you because they want it to be quality so that people actually want that material. Because there's no point...
But it's not sold on again as an old tin lid, is it? Or a jar lid. I mean, it's turned into something else. So whether you wash it or do whatever with it really makes no difference because it's going to get treated again.
It does make a huge difference to how much money you can make for it, what it can be used for, whether you separate properly or not, really makes a difference to how much people want it.
Well, we'll go into that in more detail a little bit later on, if we may. But do you think more and more people are taking it seriously?
Yeah, we've seen the UK's recycling rate increase, and I mean, you vary country by country as to how it's adopting on how sophisticated the waste management system is. But yeah, from the general population, we see a huge uptake in recycling. What we also see, though, and we did a study recently, is there an amount of confusion as to what you can properly recycle? And out of our study, 70% of the population said no, they're confused as to what is recyclable and what isn't.
Well, we believe where we live that we separate it out into bottles, cans, papers, etc., etc. But we understand that it all gets put into one great big bin at the back of the lorry and somebody else has to sort it out again later.
That's right.
It's not your... Well, so why would I want to do that?
Well, it depends on the collection system you have. Some authorities, each authority might have a different collection system, and we are arguing for people to have a more constant and consistent collection system. But we sort that material out into the constituents of paper, cardboard, into different cans, and we sort plastics by polymer type. And sophisticated MRFs like we operate do that for you.
But do you not understand why me and other people might think it's a bit of a joke that we're asked to separate it, then it's put back together, then it's separated again?
Yeah, it depends on really depends which local authority it happens to.
All right,
Yeah.
well, we'll see that one there. Talked about some countries being better than others, Sarah Jane. I've got a list here that says number 1 in the world, Germany, then Austria, then South Korea, and Wales. So what
Wales
do they
very
do that we should look at and use as a good example? Take Germany, for instance.
Well, I think Germany has been recycling for many, many years. So they have a simple to use system, but it actually focuses on quality. Lots of focus on trying to separate the materials. Residents know exactly what they need to do, how they need to do it, and that material is taken and then processed. So I think we can take elements of that system, but also elements of other systems around the world. Nobody's perfect. The UK is definitely not perfect, but we're getting there, I think.
Okay, so give me some. You talk about the amount that is separated in Germany. Wales, that's another.
Absolutely.
Why Wales?
Wales, Welsh government, I think, see the importance of recycling. They've put something forward called the Collections Blueprint, which encourages householders to separate all those materials so that they're collecting what they call clean stream materials. So separating paper from glass, cans from plastic bottles, for example. And that allows you to get quality products to then recycle them.
See, I don't really get this. I mean, why should it be my job? My job to sort out the waste that somebody else is going to make a profit from. Okay, I have contributed to it being waste in the first place. But there must be somebody somewhere who's much more skilled than me at making the right decisions on what should be taken out, what shouldn't be left in there. Karl, you help me with this one. Why does it not create resentment amongst the consumers that they have to do it rather than somebody else?
I think there's a lot of pressure on us as householders, especially in the UK, to do the sorting and the separating. But we do actually buy the products in the first place, so we have to take that responsibility that if we buy something, we should think about what we're going to do at the end of its life. You've given the list there of the different countries. They have different ways of engaging with the public.
Yeah.
So in Germany, there's a lot more information. There's a lot more social responsibility. You've got Korea on there. Korea have got a different way of charging for their waste. So if you're a local Korean, you'll be charged different amounts of money depending on how you sort your waste. So they've got a financial incentive to sort more because recyclables are a lot less value than general waste. But in the
Recycling is a lot less valuable.
a lot less cost to the household.
Yeah.
Whereas in the UK, we have a standard fee that's within our council tax. We don't see any advantage to recycling and not recycling because we still pay the same.
But at the same time, if you think the recycling rates we achieve across the UK, which are done just because people think it's the right thing to do, they're quite impressive, really. And we've increasingly moved to a situation where, you know, for electricity, increasingly water, you pay proportionate to your impact. And we don't have that for waste. And I think we should. You know, every wheelie bin made in Europe since 1996 has somewhere to put microchip housing in to charge by weight for householders. So actually, we're still just relying on householders to do the right thing because they think it's the right thing to do.
I think by charging, it also makes you have a better understanding of what's required in terms of the recycling operation. Because when it goes to Mick, it costs money to sort. But if you don't do it properly...
You know the old expression where there's muck, there's money? Yeah, I mean, people, not you personally, Mick, but I mean, you know, somebody is making a huge amount of money out of my rubbish and everybody else's is rubbish. Shouldn't you be the ones, perhaps, to pay for all of the add-ons rather than little old me?
No, that's starting at the wrong point. You've got to remember we're managing a problem. We didn't create the problem.
No, but you're not just managing it, you're making a fortune out of it.
Oh, I wish we were making a fortune. We make reasonable returns for our shareholders.
Yeah. Don't cry. Don't cry.
We're not crying. That's what we do as a business.
Yeah.
But in reality, the profits that we make and other waste management companies make are reinvested back into new facilities. So, which is trying to make the whole process sustainable, because we all need to produce quality products. And I think a simple point is recycling is the most cost-effective waste management method there is. Okay, it's cheaper than burning it, it's cheaper than going to landfill.
Well, this is what got us talking about it in the office, was landfill and China. China saying, actually, enough is enough. We're not going to take it anymore. Therefore, it's got to go somewhere else. And therefore, the rest of the world has to think of solutions. Has China's decision been bad on the one hand, because it means that the waste doesn't have a home, but good perhaps in the long run?
I think it's certainly caused governments around the world to rethink how they treat their materials. I mean, the situation in China, it was around 2013, I think, when they first started to put quality restrictions on the material that was coming in. So they've been saying, actually, we like your material, but it's got to be really good quality, clean material so that we can remanufacture it. Now, because of the restrictions, many governments around the world have actually said, so if we can't take our recycling there, can we find other outlets? But also, we need to rethink this. Can we start moving towards a circular economy? Can we start thinking about what is the best?
But by which you mean that pretty much everything that is used again, and
absolutely, yes.
At no particular cost to the environment, in an ideal world.
Ideally, yes, yeah. So just making the best use of our resources, trying to rethink actually how we use resources in the first place. So.
Do you think there's some kind of international will to do this? Because I'm just taking a look at this. Currently, Europe recycles 30% of its plastics, compared to just 9% in the United States. What's going to bring those numbers? I mean, 30%, it's getting better, but it's still not great. 9% is appalling. Is there? You study these things, Karl, don't you? Is there a will?
I think one of the things is really you need to have legislation, and you need to push the problem away from the consumers and companies such as Biffa who are dealing with the waste to the actual manufacturers. We're
actually, as a business, sort of lobbying government at the moment for a real clear recycling system. So we would like to see a traffic light system on material. So a green light for something that's easily recyclable, a red for something not, so a consumer can make an informed choice as to, yeah, that's easily recyclable, and try and the consumer pressure will be the greatest bearing on the environmental debate.
This is what I was thinking. In the last year and a half, there've been a massive environmental campaigns, particularly about single-use plastics, etc., microbeads that go into the sea. It's coming from the people. It's people power, Margaret, isn't it?
There's a bit of both. I mean, I tend to agree with what Karl was saying, but I think we need to go for value chain responsibility, so everyone has a role. You know, supermarkets don't sell stuff. Manufacturers don't make stuff that we don't want to buy. There is some confusion, but for example, a very well-known worldwide fizzy drink manufacturer has on their bottles 3 different places where it says it can be recycled, and people still say they don't know that that can be recycled. So what they really...
Sorry, I was going to say, you say it's not necessarily the supermarkets at fault here.
No,
it's me, because I'm buying things. But I want to go into my local supermarket and buy 3 carrots, 4 potatoes, 5 lemons, let's say, and they all come in plastic wrapping. That's not my choice.
No, but some of that stuff comes in plastic wrapping because you've bought it out of season and it's being transported halfway across the world. So that's why. So in the olden days, when I was young, if you bought strawberries, you would only buy strawberries in the summer in the UK.
I know.
Now you expect to get them all year round. So when we're saying it's excessive packaging, sometimes that packaging isn't to get it home from the supermarket, it's to get it the hundreds or thousands of miles to the supermarket.
You make a very, very good point there. Yeah, well, thank you very much indeed for that. But what about this company called TerraCycle? And there are others as well. You all know of it because we mentioned it beforehand. The boss of that company says we can recycle anything. Is that possible?
Well, everything can be recycled.
He says cigarette butts, dirty nappies, diapers.
But it comes down to the economics of it and how much energy you're going to put into actually recycling those products, because what we should be moving towards is a carbon accounting system. So how much carbon are we saving by recycling, and how much carbon are we using by actually processing it? So it is,
there's a trade-off.
There's a trade-off between the two.
And the problem with comments like that is they try to sanitise waste management or the amount of waste you generated. where in reality we want people to buy material that's easily recycled. You have to change patterns, you have to change people's behaviour for this to really progress further. We've got to a good position, but we actually need behaviours to change. And that starts with the brands, what they actually try to sell us and what packaging they try to sell us. These wild claims of we can recycle everything. Everything's possible. We put man on the moon in 1969. Anything we do in waste management after that is fairly minor by comparison, but you want to make it simple.
What are you doing? You mentioned the traffic light system, which you'd like to see, but
Yep.
what are you doing in terms of new discoveries that will help us advance our some of knowledge when it comes to this, but also our means of not destroying the planet with all this stuff we put in it, on it?
Well, there's two levels we try and work at. One, we're trying to work at a technical level. So things like, if you look at your milk bottles, you'll see there's a 30-40% recycled content in them. That's us, and we work
But sorry, quickly, my milk bottle has a top and a carton.
Yes.
How can you divide that into 34%? I mean, inside
Because...
the top is and the bottom isn't, or what?
No.
That's 50-50. Help me.
Well, the industry helped itself on that because the dairies, the supermarkets all got together about 10 years ago and they all homogenised what goes into a milk bottle. So the cap is made of the same material as the bottle and the same material as the label, so it's all recyclable. And that is the great transition you need. And it's the only example of it working in the world, but that's true circular economy. The people at the front end changed how they manufacture bottles, and made it easier for recycling, and therefore you got the inclusion rate. You can go to 30, 40, 50%.
Yeah.
And that is true circular economy stuff.
It makes you wonder how they arrived at that particular point. It's not an altruistic decision. I'm sure there was some financial reason in it, or
No,
why aren't other people doing the same thing?
Because they recognised, I think, probably a threat that they needed to recycle that as a product, and they all understood that threat as an industry because it's probably the best way to collect milk is in a bottle with a container on the side, which has to be HDPE.
But this is happening, you know, we have this weird disparity, and this is one of the things about producer responsibility, that the average drinks bottle contains 15% recycled content, and we're pushing for them to be higher. But the industry, the bottle industry, is already increasing that. There are some that make their bottles out of 100% recycled PET and have done for years.
This is the plastic that most containers are made of.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we really do need to move away from this. You can buy what you want as long as it can be recycled.
We've talked about recycling. Let's talk about the other kind of waste, that which you cannot at this moment recycle. China's become more fussy. It said, you know, it's got to be of a particular grade of material for us now to take it. So where is it all going to go?
Well, I think there's quite a lot that's been diverted to other southeastern countries to deal with it, and that's bad because countries such as Vietnam can't actually deal with their waste management as it is, let alone taking our recycled material as well, because it's mainly to do with the quality, as Sarah Jane said, and it's the rejects. And all it's doing is pushing the problem around. So a lot of the time, whereas we think it as a positive thing, because it means that as a nation we can look at higher quality, financially, you just look at the next country to send.
It's a bit of exploitation, though, isn't it? Because, you know, Vietnam, if it takes it, is quite happy to perhaps make a bit of money, but parts of a beautiful country will get eaten up because Western governments themselves don't want to have this as their responsibility.
So you are moving the problem, moving the problem around, and that's one of the challenges, because you're putting our waste to countries that haven't got the infrastructure to deal with it or to deal with their own waste.
One day, all of these countries will be filled up, or they'll say no.
Mm-hmm.
So what do we do then? Can we keep digging holes in the ground, wet landfill?
No, but we can build more recycling plants. People like us are investing in recycling plants as we speak. And one of the benefits of the China situation is we've actually seen an export of our recycling capacity to the Far East because we've not been able to compete in the UK because of cheaper power, cheaper labour costs.
Yeah.
So this kind of ban actually will see a repatriation back to the UK of recycling capacity as people like us are investing in it. So there is a transitional period.
So there's more thinking going on about what to do with it rather than just simply bury it.
Yeah, we've had a
burn
policy for four or 5 years now. We minimise what plastics we will export because we've been concerned about the treatment abroad, and other people with ethical standards should be.
Do you remember that barge, 1987 or wherever it was, that left New York and nobody knew what to do with it.
Yeah.
They went to various different places. Do we have those going around the world at the moment still?
We do have them for some specialist waste types, but we've also had a number of international conventions to try and stop that. But we also, one of the things that the UK is really good at is about sharing some of our expertise abroad as well. Because this isn't a UK problem, this is a global problem.
Yes.
Where we're worried about plastics now, other countries are now starting to worry about their plastics. The same's true of electronic waste, that we have concerns about that
Because
as well.
tech waste these days is massive, isn't it? I think
Yeah.
it started off as sort of like 0.01 when we had the first tech machine.
Yeah.
Now it's something around about 40-50%, is that
It's
right?
the fastest growing waste
Yeah.
stream in the world. So we need to look at the way we deal with all of this stuff, but we shouldn't also discount the role of things like energy from waste. So you mentioned some countries with very high recycling rates. They also do a lot of energy from waste. So where they can't actually economically or environmentally recycle it, they recover the energy from it and provide heat and electricity to the local communities and industry.
The people who prepared the report to which you're referring, which talked about Germany, South Korea, etc., and then Wales down it, also said that those people who claimed they were recycling 60% of their goods were actually lying. Those people who said it was 45%, well, it was probably nearer 35%. So we're sort of patting ourselves on the back, perhaps, well before we should do. We've got a long way to go yet.
Absolutely. I mean, there's always things that we can do. And I think we, in more developed countries, we are in a good situation that we have got sophisticated infrastructure. We understand the issues. We can, try and recycle more. But, the systems that we have in the UK, 1 in 3 people globally actually don't have access to a waste management system. So they don't get a doorstep collection. They haven't got waste facilities down the road. And they do, unfortunately, in terms of trying to get rid of their waste, they may dump it or burn it, which causes horrendous health impacts and also environmental impacts.
But what choices do they have? You
Limited
can't live with it
choices,
because of
actually.
reasons of room, space, hygiene, etc., etc. You have to get rid of it somewhere.
Very limited
Which brings me back to
choices.
this international will.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're a UK-based company,
Yeah.
but we are trying to work with WasteAid, a charity who are trying to sponsor projects.
But
out
this is
in
something you're
other
very
countries.
interested
Yeah.
in, isn't
Yes,
it?
yes.
Waste aid.
WasteAid. So I'm a trustee of WasteAid, who are doing.
Tell us about that.
It's a charity, international charity, doing amazing work, actually trying to improve waste management by creating sustainable jobs, helping local communities to focus on what waste is being produced and trying to develop ways of using that material better that's appropriate for the situation. So we look at collecting plastics to make plastic tiles that can be used locally, organic waste that can be made into charcoal for fuel, anything that's useful for that local community.
Karl, as a student of this, and I call you a student because you study it the whole time, not because you are a student, you're a professor of it, but do you think we're on the right track generally in some ways?
I think for countries that don't have waste management systems in place, then things that WasteAid are doing are good, but they're not really going to solve the problem because you really need to have it on a much larger and a much more national level. And a lot of countries suffer from not having the infrastructure in place to allow people to deal with their waste the way they want to. So I go to quite a lot of countries. I've been to Sri Lanka recently and Vietnam, and you have people that want to do the best thing with their waste materials, but the infrastructure doesn't exist. And a lot of the time they say, what else can we do with it? And they either end up dumping it or they end up burning it because there's no value to it. So there's value for plastic bottles because they've got an intrinsic value. So I was saying the other day when I was looking at waste, but it's the things like plastic bags, trays, polystyrene, things that don't have a value ends up being dumped or burned.
Quick question, we don't have very much more time. Let's say I produce a ton of waste a year. It may be more, it may be less. I have absolutely no idea. But do you think there'll ever come a time when 99% of that is back in what you call the circular economy? Do you think we will get there?
I'd like to see your ton of waste become a lot less than a ton of waste.
Yes, okay, no, I understand that.
So when we've made your ton a kilo, then what we can do, because it won't be waste if we can recycle it, all it stays in the system. what we want to do is make sure that we get the value from everything, reduce what you buy and then get the value out of it so it can be used again and again. Classic example for that would be the difference between disposable or reusable nappies, for example.
So go back to the old washable ones and do them by hand at the bottom of the garden in the
No,
stream.
you don't. It's not old
Okay,
fashioned.
I don't think
to
we're
use
going. I don't think we're going back to there. Final thoughts, Sarah Jane.
Really, we need to reframe the way that we think about waste. So recycling is great, but we need to focus on the valuable resources and the things that we're buying. Buy less stuff,
Yeah.
recycle what we buy.
Is waste sexy these days?
It's always been sexy. How you deal with it, isn't it? And the reality is we need people to, we need producers to make more homogeneous products so it's easier to recycle. And we need producers to take responsibility in the developing world, because if you sell a product where you know there is no waste management collection system, that's sort of morally wrong, because there is an environmental cost and we basically share the planet.
We do share the planet. Listen, thank you very, very much indeed. I've learned quite a lot, even though we've been talking simply rubbish, which a lot of you may think we do most days here on Roundtable. No, I didn't mean that. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for coming in. We hope to have your company next time. You can find us on YouTube. That's at Roundtable TRT World YouTube. Bye-bye for now.